Hello, this is a copy of the Leavers Assembly, which will be given to Prior Park College's class of 2025 on the morning of our Leavers Day on the 5th of July. Now, I tend to write assemblies in my head for a few weeks before I put pen to paper. Because I'm such an old fogey though, I often do actually write with a pen, which I love. The problem with that is that anyone who has ever been taught by me will tell you just how terrible my handwriting is. Any work I mark or any notes I make on a whiteboard will always lead to someone saying, "Sir, what does that say?" More often than not then, I write as so many do now, on my computer. This is my 5th Leavers Assembly, and I found it a hard one to write. Maybe the well is running dry. I've done these sorts of assemblies on various weird and wonderful things. Tall buildings, tattoos, etiquette. Who knows? Some of you may even remember some of them. This year though, I started writing on one screen, and on my other screen, I had the news headlines up. These did not make for happy readings. Now, I wrote this assembly a few weeks ago, and the headlines were filled with plans for final attacks on Iran, the failure of HS2, a rise in human trafficking, and airline crashes. It made me feel worried. However, there was one positive headline on the front page, and it was about education. It read that the government was to make students argue in favour of views they find offensive. Now, this may appear to be an odd thing for me to be happy about. Why should I want anyone, especially young people, to be offended? In my time as Prior Park College's headmaster, I've done something like 50 assemblies. Now, a fair chunk of these have been pretty vanilla, and no one has taken offence. However, I've done a few that have really gotten some people's backs up. I have had complaints about assemblies I've done on pulling down statues of slave traders. Some people have gotten cross with me for talking publicly about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Objections have been made about me referencing historic child sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. Some younger members of staff even took umbrage when I spoke about Gen Z's inability to change a light bulb. I like that word, umbrage. It means offence or annoyance due to a perceived insult. It is derived from the Latin word umbra, which means shadow. And an early sense of the word umbrage was a shadow outline. Shakespeare used it, and he used it in that way to describe Hamlet. Who else would trace him, his umbrage, nothing more. The word umbrage evolved over the centuries to mean an indistinct indication, something that was just enough to make you think that you should take offence at something. Now, my assemblies are written for young people, typically between the ages of 11 and 18, and I try not to shy away from difficult issues and topics. Young people want to know. They want to understand. Now, our college values are courage, generosity, and curiosity. And I know that young people are curious about the world around them and all of its complexities. I try to have the courage to explain complicated issues. And I think that most of our community is generous enough to engage with those complexities in a spirit of rigorous intellectual debate. I like nothing more than students coming to talk to me about my assemblies and challenging the ideas I may have put out there. Watching them push back against my thoughts in order to clarify their own views is brilliant fun. It is a huge part of the reason that I do this job. I've adored the humour with which the young people here at Prior have approached tricky issues. There is often a seriousness underlying it, but usually humour is used to ensure that criticisms are softened so that they can be better received. As Mary Poppins sang, "A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down." And I think that students here at Prior Park know that humour should be a huge part of life. And I urge today's leavers not ever to forget that. Now, many of this year's upper sixth will be heading to university, and there will be opportunities galore to continue testing their beliefs and their thoughts. However, many universities today are battlegrounds for beliefs. At least that's what the newspapers say. Because in reality, universities have always been battlegrounds for beliefs. 200 years ago, back in 1819, the German Confederation, the Deutsche Bund, launched a series of attacks on universities called the Carlsbad Decrees. These measures banned liberal clubs, they sacked liberal professors, and they expanded censorship in universities. Universities used to be feared by the state. There was a worry that those in universities were going to become committed to overthrowing the government or the monarchy. For centuries, universities have been hotbeds of idealism, crucibles of competing and conflicting ideas. Now, 25 years ago, when I was at university, I remember being politically agnostic. I just wanted to do some work, play some sport, and have quite a lot of fun. I managed all three. I was aware, though, that there were people at university who were heavily involved in politics. And at the exact same time, at the same university, our current Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, was rising through the ranks of my university's Labour Club. Now, I was in tutorials with one of the chairs of that Labour Club. And it was amazing to listen to him argue everything through the lens of socialism. Even if I didn't agree with everything he said, I still listened. I knew people who went to the university's Conservative Association, and I didn't agree with everything they said either. I listened, though, and I respected their opinions. Later, I taught a few people who went on to chair the Conservative group, and I respected their opinions, even when I disagreed with them. Universities have, for centuries, tried to respect a plurality of ideas. Unis should be safe spaces where you can test your thoughts, your ideas, and your beliefs. And in the age of social media, it feels like there's a little less of this freedom in our universities and in education more broadly. There is an increasing concern to not express views that might differ from the norm. And there are real-world consequences for daring to be different. This is not new. In ancient Athens, broken shards of pottery were called ostraka. Athenian citizens would write on these pieces to decide whether to expel someone from the city for 10 years. It was a way of expressing popular anger at someone, but it could often be used preemptively. It's from these broken shards of pottery, these ostraka, that we get today's word, ostracism. Now, I'd hazard a guess that most students today wouldn't use that word to describe the phenomenon. Instead, they'd probably just use the word cancelled. It's a similar process. Someone expresses an opinion that diverges a little from popularly acceptable opinions, and bam, they're cancelled. They may be attacked on social media. They may be attacked in person. Speakers are no platform at universities for saying words that some people might be offended by. Some academics have been sacked by universities for expressing controversial views, not hate speech, but opinions that others just don't like. It might be about Gaza, or it might be about trans rights. It might be about any number of tricky issues that people tend to shy away from. So I guess I'm asking today's leavers to avoid shying away from tricky issues, even if you don't always engage with them fully. Don't ostracise those that do. Don't join social media pile-ons. Don't call for cancellation of those with whom you might disagree. Instead, listen respectfully and respectfully disagree. Learn things. Be good to each other. Read the newspapers. Read a book. Remember pluralism. Keep accepting more than one idea. I'd like to counsel all the leavers to put their effort, their energy, their emotions, and their endeavours into activities where they can have a real impact. St. Paul wrote, "Avoid foolish and ignorant disputes." Solid advice. Don't live in a social media bubble of likes and present an idealised version of yourself. Instead, try and enjoy the next step in your life by being present. More than any time in recent history, our leavers' destiny might not be of their own choosing. There are seismic forces at play in our world today. And you can choose to be worried by them, as I was when I read those headlines when I started writing this assembly. Or our leavers can choose to embrace them. They can choose to live in every moment and to take an approach to life that brings them joy in every moment that they experience. I wonder if we might all benefit from being just a little more present. Now, by this point of this assembly, I've been speaking for about 1,400 words, so around 10 minutes or so. I wonder how many of them in the assembly, when I give this tomorrow, will be wondering what's happened on their phone. I wonder how many people watching it online have already checked their phone in that time. Now, it may surprise some of you to know that I love going to gigs, to concerts and to live music. I don't just sit at home reading books and devising new policies to torture teenagers with. I was at a gig last month in London, standing and enjoying a bit of a dance to one of my favourite bands. The doors opened at 7, the support act came on at 8, and from 9 o'clock the main event played an hour and 40 minutes set. It was mesmeric. I was in the moment for nearly the entirety of those 100 minutes. But every so often I noticed that the woman who was standing just to the side of me, because we were in a very tame mosh pit, for the entire gig was filming the action through her phone. Now, the band I was watching had hardly ever played in the UK. They're from East Texas. So this was a rare opportunity for her to see them live, to see them beyond videos on YouTube. Yet rather than watch them, rather than actually be present in that sweaty hall in Shepherd's Bush, she viewed the whole thing through a 6.1-inch OLED display. Now, Apple will tell you that the OLED display exists for high quality visuals. And sure, it looks great, but it isn't better than your own eyes. The human eye doesn't have a zoom function. So maybe you think that that might make it worse on a phone camera, because tech must be better, right? No. Talk to a biologist. The eye doesn't need a zoom. It works differently from a camera. We don't have to move a phone or pinch a screen. Instead, our eyes adjust the shape of the lens and the position of our gaze to perceive clarity that no phone can come close to matching. What we see in our mind's eye is a reconstruction, a complex interpretation of what our eyes receive. Not just light, but meaning. A camera can only ever capture light. Our eyes and our brains, on the other hand, are the result of millions of years of evolution. 10 million electrical connections allow us to process 1.5 million messages simultaneously. Muscles, fluid, membranes, cones, rods, pigments, they all come together to create images and memories that will stay with us, even when the phone runs out of battery or becomes obsolete. The woman next to me in that gig wasn't experiencing the gig. It wasn't what a gig should be for her. Now, one of my favourite live artists, not the one I saw last month, has a song in it that I think speaks to this moment with the lines, "Well, life is about love, last minutes and lost evenings, about fire in our bellies and about furtive little feelings, and the aching amplitudes that set our needles all a-flickering, and they help us with remembering that the only thing that's left to do is live. Yeah, the only thing that's left to do is live." So I'd urge the leavers of 2025 to do that. Live. Don't permanently worry about what's next. Don't worry about recording what you are doing. Don't worry about projecting a perfect image. Many of you have received awards in this assembly, and many parents will stand up with the iPhone and record those moments. Many students at tomorrow night's ball will take photographs of each other. They'll take photographs at the lunch, they'll take photographs throughout the day. How many of those photographs will they delete though? How many will they put on their stories and snaps? How many will they look back at on the iCloud in years to come? I honestly don't think it will be that many. By reaching for the phone and by taking the photo, are you living a life or are you just recording a copy of a life? When you reach for the phone later, stop. Look at the moment. Live in the moment. Absorb the moment. Hold on to the memory. It'll be that, I promise. It'll be the memory and not the photo that those leavers remember. It'll be in the recesses of their brains and not the Insta story that stays with them forever. So when this assembly is given to the leavers tomorrow, I'm going to take the opportunity to create a memory for everyone in that chapel. No one will record it, but I will be asking the class of 2025 to stand up. I will ask them to turn around and catch the eyes of their parents and their loved ones. I will ask them to think on the sacrifices that their parents have made to send them to this wonderful school. And I will ask them to think about all those difficult moments that parenting a teenager brings. I will ask them to think about every time they've made their parents' life tough and every time they've brought their parents joy. Most of all though, I'll ask them to say thank you. To say it with their eyes, to say it with their hands, to say it from their hearts. We're going to finish the assembly tomorrow with a memory and not a photo. A memory for each of the parents and for every one of the class of 2025. A memory of a thank you. We're going to sit in that moment for a bit tomorrow, and I'm going to let the class of 2025 end that assembly by giving their parents a lasting memory of their children, giving them a huge round of applause. Thank you. Have a great summer.